The Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. This morning, we're turning our attention to one of the most ambitious economic projects in modern history, the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA as it's called. It's a single market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of over $3 trillion. The promise is to break down trade barriers, boost industrialization, attract investment, and create jobs. But nearly 5 years after it came into effect, many Africans are asking, how can the continent truly leverage AfCFTA to grow the economy, attract investment, and deliver prosperity? Well, joining me to unpack this crucial conversation is Ambassador Success Bright, is the president of Focus Africa. It's been at the forefront of conversations on trade, investment, and Africa's positioning in the global economy. Welcome to the show, Success.
Thank you very much for
It's
having
very
me on
good
the
to have
show.
you this morning. It's a real joy to have you this morning on the show. Let's start with the big picture, really. AfCFTA has been described as a game changer. From where you sit right now, what's the single most important step that Africa must take right now to unlock its potential?
Yeah, first is good to establish what we're talking about when we refer to AfCFTA. This was an agreement brokered in Rwanda, the African Union, signed by 44 out of the 53 member states. That was signed in Kigali. And coincidentally, I hosted the breakfast section, a high-level breakfast section between government, parastatals, and key funding presidents of corporations in Africa. That meeting was held in Ikoyi in 2017. I actually hosted that conversation, trying to have discussions that put a framework around AfCFTA. Now, back to your question, actually, the single most important step right now is full, fast, and consistent implementation of what AfCFTA stands for. Actually, this has to do with removing barriers at borders. This also has to do with harmonizing rules and making the AfCFTA market work in practice. Policies are only useful when merchant trade without long delays, when rules are predictable, when government have the policies affect businesses positively, not the one that clamps them down. And when cross-border systems like payment, customs, standards operate reliably, that's what will help us to move forward.
We see that Africa still trades far more with the outside world than it does within itself. And it's quite interesting if you ask me. How can AfCFTA change that reality, and what does it mean for investors who are looking at the continent right now?
For investors who are looking at the continent, I will advise the policymakers and AfCFTAs to put structures on ground to empower businesses that operate in the country. That is one step to make these things work. And you're talking about regional, setting up regional factories, logistics hubs, Pan-African brands, rather than just exporting what we have. We need to strengthen our structures within the continent and make things work. We're already seeing intra-Africa trade rising. In fact, recent report shows that formal intra-Africa trade is growing roughly at 14 to 15% of African trade and rising year on year. So we need to sign implementation moves that helps us empower structures that we have around. Now, for foreign investors, when they see that all of these things are growing, the indices, the database are there to show that we are growing, they will definitely come to invest in Africa. It's a sure thing.
Also, for small businesses, they do make up over 80% of Africa's economy. Many of them you see struggling with financing, they're struggling with logistics, they're struggling with access to markets. How can AfCFTA be shaped so that this SMEs benefit, not just the big players are benefiting, but the SMEs also benefit?
We keep emphasizing all of these things. We keep saying that SMEs need to be empowered. So first, we need to design a practical SME access measures that help simple exports. This can be done by creating export windows, one-stop digital registration, and low cross-border logistics corridors. These are very, very important because when you are playing in a society and you don't have access to other markets, access to export and all of that, and windows, you have windows, but there are a lot of tariffs that does not help you. It becomes a very big program. Second, we need to link SME to aggregator platforms and regional value chains so they supply to large manufacturers. So it's not just enough for us to have SMEs. Let's also give them access to supply to those who are playing big in the market. The third thing I would like to even talk about is to pair tariff liberalization with targeted support. Government should have tariffs in place, but let's also support people to meet up with whatever tariffs they need to do, because sometimes there are downturn in businesses. We need to recognize all of that and not just slam tariffs on SMEs that destroy them instead of helping them grow. So finally, we can also make paper work digital and cheap. In a situation where you go to our borders, maybe you want to clear a car, for instance, you have to do work, paperwork. At the end of the day, it's discouraging. It doesn't allow for easy flow of things.
And when we look around, Ambassador Bright, infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges that we have. It's still a major challenge, from the roads to the ports to power supply, often slowing down trade. How crucial really is it for us to fix these bottlenecks if AfCFTA is going to succeed, and where should government start from?
This is a very important question. Look, fixing infrastructure is very essential. You cannot, as a matter of fact, you cannot have a free trade area where it takes days to move a truck from a short distance to another place. Now, I was interfacing with one of our directors at Focus Africa who lives in Borno State, and he was telling me the challenge of moving goods and services from Borno to Niger Republic and all of that. We're talking about free trade area. So when there are border issues that do not allow free flow of goods and services, it impacts heavily on what we are doing. So government should start with low-hanging fruit. We should talk about high impact investment, border modernization, put things in our borders that make things easy, like putting computer checking systems, whether it's for cars, for planes that convey goods and services. All of these things need to be addressed. We have to have things that make trade easy in the country. So infrastructure is one of them. That infrastructure has to do with road network. You even have to do with IT systems that we can put in place to make these things work.
And one of the other challenge you would notice is payment. They happen to be another hurdle. And you also see that doing business across borders can be seen as often expensive and complicated because of currency issues. Do you see systems like the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, that's the PAPS, do you see it as a genuine solution or just another layer of red tape?
I remember saying when, back in the days when EcoBank and some of the banks were trying to make sure that PAPS work, I said then that I hope this is not going to be another beautiful book in the shelf. And 5 years down the line, we're still having challenges with it. But I think that PAPS is a very genuine solution, but only if scaled and linked to local banks and platforms. If the local banks that we're having are not able to integrate, are not able to flow with the vibe, it becomes very difficult to implement. As of today, payment systems have remained a challenge. For some of us that host conversations in other countries through our conferences and all of that, you have this challenge where somebody wants to pay for a conference fee or pay for a product. It becomes increasingly difficult because the only route is to do dollar exchange. So sometimes you have to carry cash to where you are going to. But in a situation where you need to pay for something and you're not traveling carrying cash, it becomes challenging if systems like PAPS are not working. So we need to integrate this thing into local bank, and I feel that every stakeholder need to buy into it. We shouldn't see it as an EcoBank idea or an FCMB idea, or so there should be a policy from financial regulators to say we need to find a solution to payment challenges as we have it in Africa.
Let's talk about the AfCFTA investment protocol, which was introduced to give investors more confidence. What more should governments be doing to make Africa an attractive and predictable place for investment?
For me, the investment protocol is a strong start. Now, government must act on the basis of the basis the investors care about. This includes to clear and have a stable domestic investment laws, transparent procurement, quick tax, dispute resolution. If all of these things are put together, then the investment protocol introduced by AfCFTA will work. So this cannot be done only by maybe the traders and all of that. This has to be a policy from government that needs to be driven to the letter and obeyed by everyone. So for me, I think that this investment protocol is a very good start. But now government needs to act, because government makes the laws, government enforces the laws, and everybody flows. Now, when government is doing this, they need to be as transparent as they can. Their disposition must show that they want to support businesses in Africa to thrive.
And if we're looking really across sectors right now, in your opinion, which of the industries do you think are best positioned to take advantage of the AfCFTA in the near term? Are we looking at agriculture? Are we looking at manufacturing, renewables, or even digital trade? Which of them are we shining a light on?
For me, we should look at all of them. Now, you see this overdependence on imported items, goods from Europe, from Asia, from the China, and all of that. If we can look inward and begin to focus on the key sectors, we'll depend less on this foreign importation. So, emphasis on agribusiness and processed foods, the value chains. In fact, let me speak more on this. You see, the idea of exporting our raw materials to Europe and the rest for them to process and send back to us is part of the reasons why we're depending heavily on them. Now, if you take cassava, for instance, there are a lot of things that comes out from cassava when you process it. You have the gari, the flours, and the rest of them. So the challenge is that for far too long, we export our things in a raw material state, and then we look back at importing them back in the country. So I think the emphasis should be on agribusiness and the processed foods, empowering local indigenous companies to do it there. Well, I'm also looking at the light manufacturing, where you have the likes of Tesa, agro processing, basic chemicals, and all of that. I'm also looking at renewable energy, where you have the wind, the grid, and a whole lot of things. So I think emphasis should be on some of these things that will depend heavily on foreign countries to supply us in Africa.
Really, really well said. And you're looking at the African entrepreneurs who might be watching this conversation right now. In essence, and in more practical terms, what will the AfCFTA mean for them? How should they be positioning themselves to take advantage of these opportunities?
For me and for them, AfCFTA should mean that we should think regional. Think regional, not just your country. Steps to take now: digitize your businesses. When you want to think regional, it means you need to digitize your businesses. It means that you need to make basic product packaging. One day I was at the airport, I was traveling, and I had a conversation with an SME, an entrepreneur at Lagos Airport, and we were having a discussion about her product. She was like, her product had been rejected in the US market and some places. What are the challenges? She confessed to me that the major challenge is that they say that her packaging does not meet standard. So this has to do with branding and a whole lot of things. So as much as we are trying to leverage AfCFTA platform as young entrepreneurs, as established entrepreneurs, we should take the issue of brand packaging very seriously. Then we should digitalize our platforms, our business. We have e-commerce platforms and all of that, because all the time you can't travel with your goods to go deliver. You might not even be able to send a dispatch rider from Nigeria to Cameroon to deliver. So when you have your platforms digitalized, you can have your products stored in another country. Somebody click and you sell. So when we talk about AfCFTA, we're talking about region, looking at the whole countries in Africa. not just where you are, not between Osun State and Plateau State.
Right, and just before I let you go, if you had just one message right now for African leaders about what it will take to make AfCFTA a real success story, what would that message be?
I will advise stakeholders. I will advise everyone to put implementation ahead of optics. We talk. We need to drive implementation. There are a lot of beautiful policies that we have in the country. A few days, 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation. I was a guest speaker at the World Decarbonization Summit, and I told them that we're having a lot of discussions. What we need to move ahead to do now is to implement. So the most single important leadership task is to sustain and to coordinate action. We need to coordinate our actions, sustain the policies we have, and make sure we drive it to the letter.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this morning to spotlight this very crucial conversation. Ambassador Success Bright, the president of Focus Africa. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much.
Well, this has been the big story right here on the BDTV Breakfast Show. Up next is social listening. Do stay with us.